Good morning and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for coming by. Sub-Saharan Africa, a very interesting article by Latif of Quartz about the debt trap narrative around Chinese loans shows Africa's weak economic diplomacy. Hugging the shores of the Indian Ocean, Kenya's Mombasa port is one of the biggest and busiest harbors in East Africa. Almost 1,800 vessels docked at the port in 2017 alone, with cargo worth over 30 million tons processed. Much of it heading to neighboring or landlocked nations, including Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and DR Congo. The spectre of Beijing extracting economic or political concessions from a nation unable to pay its debt obligations was first underscored in December 2017 when Sri Lanka gave 70% equity in a 99-year lease for its strategic Hambantota port. Since then, nations from Djibouti and Maldives to Laos and Pakistan have been named as facing risks of debt distress, especially in the face of the multi-billion Belt and Road Initiative. And with no officially published contracts or no written predictable rules of how Beijing responds to a loan default, people are free to speculate, says W. Gude Moore, a visiting fellow at the Center for Global Development. Between 2000 and early 2019, there were 85 instances when China cancelled or restructured debt globally, including most recently in Cameroon. Yet, Beijing's debt relief or repayment actions, Moore notes, remains haphazard. It's unpredictable, there's nothing written, it's confusing, he said. And Zetse Wary, the general public, she said, remain in the dark about the deals with China. We don't know how much we owe, we don't know the terms. She adds, and with no capacity to effectively negotiate, their agendas will drive our response rather than our agenda meeting them with their interest and seeing how we can both benefit, she said. Moore adds, China doesn't have to sign up to the Paris Club rules. China can write up its own rules and publish them. In the meantime, Ware says African citizens have to agitate for and build technocratic governments that are responsive democratically. That's probably the greatest challenge for our generation. 18th of June last year, I said the first overarching point is that creditors are not Santa Claus and miscues will exact a very heavy price. Countries will be Hambantoted. Earlier, I said Sri Lanka, which gorged on Chinese debt, has had to disgorge the Hambantota port to its creditor. South African all shares up 2.79% year to date. Dollar Rand last trading at 13.40. Egyptian pound at 17.60. Nigerian election dominated by time bomb of youth unemployment, says the FT. Then it starts off with this gentleman called Yao Umar, said he had barely managed to earn $3 on a recent weekday at his open-air barbershop, which operates under a sheet of tin hanging off a half-built building in Kano. A few years ago, he lamented he made 5 or more times that amount in a day. Mr. Buhari is seeking re-election on February the 16th in Africa's most populous nation, and his record on jobs is one of his greatest vulnerabilities. Running against him is former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, a wealthy businessman whose pointed campaign slogan is "Let's get Nigeria working again." Since Mr. Buhari took office in 2015, the unemployment rate in Africa's largest economy has soared, rising from 8.2% to 23.1% in the third quarter of 2018. At a business forum in Lagos last month, Mr. Abubakar warned that jobless youths were like a time bomb. We must create jobs, if not we will get mobbed one day by the unemployed youths, he said. Andrew Nevin, chief economist for PwC in Nigeria, said that with the working age population of Nigeria growing at roughly 3% a year, the country's economy would need to expand at 6 to 8% annually to reduce youth unemployment. In each of the past 2 years, GDP growth has only been about 2%. And then another comment from Mr. Mukhtar: Buhari's a gentleman, he's not a thief, he's done a good job on defense, roads, construction, on electricity and power. I wrote about Ouagadougou in November 2014, and then I said then what's clear is that a very young, very informed, very connected African youth demographic, which many characterize as a demographic dividend, which for beautiful Blaise turned into a demographic terminator, is set to alter the existing equilibrium between the rulers and their subjects, and a rebalancing has begun. And I think that's what the FT is talking about. Nigerian all shares down 2.09% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange down 3.42% this year. This is Mr. Bristow, who's the new CEO of Barrick. This is a disaster for everyone. There is not one stakeholder that hasn't suffered from this impasse. Not the long-suffering shareholders of Acacia Mining, ultimately Barrick, the government, treasury, and ultimately the people of Tanzania. He was speaking at the Mining Indaba conference in Cape Town. The industry in Tanzania is hurting, he said. You can't negotiate anywhere, particularly in Africa, with a deadline, he said. Principle for sharing 50-50 should be acceptable to the mining industry. He also added, we are paranoid about our tailings facilities. We worry about the pressures on the walls. I wrote earlier this year that investors are having to price in a Magufuli haircut. And now we learn Tanzania is mulling renegotiating gas contracts it deems unfavorable. Tanzania said it might renegotiate natural gas contracts if its review finds terms agreed as far back as 2 decades unfavorable to the East African nation. Assessment of 11 agreements started 2 months ago and is the latest in a series of measures by President Magufuli's government to secure more revenue. The new laws include the Permanent Sovereignty Act that requires parliamentary approval for future agreements which must fully secure the interests of Tanzanians. It also restricts exports of raw minerals, repatriation of funds, and access to an international dispute resolution mechanism. Moving to Kenya, the public debt to GDP ratio increased considerably over the past 5 years to 57% at the end of June 2018, says the AFDB in a report that's reported in the Business Daily. Kenya's public debt crossed the 5 trillion shilling threshold for the first time in June last year, representing 14.3% growth year over year. Treasury mandarins have often maintained that Kenya can bear its current debt load. AFDB says the share of loans from non-concessional sources has increased, partly because Kenya issued a $2 billion Eurobond in February 2018. The IMF's debt sustainability analysis elevated the country's risk of debt stress to moderate. I wrote about this 2 weekends ago when I was talking about a $3.5 billion call, 2.5 billion in Eurobonds, $1 billion in syndicated loans, and I said it's tactically the right call because it kicks the can down the road. I said over the last few months there's been a significant reduction in US rate expectations. Expectations around growth have tilted lower. This downshifting has seen the US interest curve shift significantly lower. And in turn, this has boosted frontier and sub-Saharan African sovereign debt prices and lowered yields. For example, Kenya's 30-year Eurobond denominated in dollars was above 10%. It's now below 9%. We learned last week that Kenya is seeking proposals for the issuance of a $2.5 billion Eurobond and $1 billion of syndicated loans. And I said, whilst it's obvious we're fully loaded, and this is a phenomena that's not unique to us, it's continent-wide, how we can deal with the balance sheet is key. However, a $3.5 billion call now, I said, tactically is the right call. It kicks the can down the road. The Ministry of Mining in Kenya is reporting a 3-fold growth in revenues generated from permits and licenses. We have registered impressive growth in revenue since enactment of the Mining Act 2016. Nairobi All Shares really come flying out of the blocks. It's up 12.4% so far this year. The NSE 20 regained the 3,000 level for the first time in nearly 5 months. And the Nairobi All Share has been on a very good run. Top performers at the NSE in 2019, one NIC Bank up 29.14%, two Centum up 26.32%, Housing Finance up 25.63%, Equity Bank up 22.09%, EABL up 21.6%, Safaricom up 19.37%, Sanlam up 17.5%. The NSE 20 is up 6.04% year to date. I appreciate you coming by and remaining until the end of this podcast. Thank you.